Hello, I'm Arlyn Hackett, and welcome to Storytellers of San Diego. The first black person I ever talked to was Aunt Jemima. I know that sounds crazy, but I was 5 years old. I lived on a farm in north central Kansas, and I loved pancakes. And my mother told me that Aunt Jemima was going to be in the local grocery store demonstrating pancakes this coming Saturday. I was excited. I loved pancakes. We got to the store and they directed us to the back where Aunt Jemima was making pancakes. I looked and I was going, "Where is Aunt Jemima?" Because standing before me was this young woman, skinny, short. She didn't look like anything like Aunt Jemima. I was shocked. I couldn't believe what was happening. I didn't know at that time that Aunt Jemima was not a real person. I thought that picture on the pancake box was the real Aunt Jemima, and Aunt Jemima was real. My mom had encouraged me to ask her questions and introduce myself. I could just basically just stammer through a few words. I don't even know if I said anything. When we left, I really felt like I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I don't know what I felt. I just couldn't talk. So that night at the dinner table, my father was saying, "Well, how was Aunt Jemima?" And I was just kind of stammering and not wanting to say anything. But my mother quickly spoke up, and she had lots to say. And she was telling how that she had talked to our neighbor, Ava Kelly, that afternoon after we got back from the store, and Ava had all these statements to say about Aunt Jemima when she was at the store. They had to bring her lunch from somewhere else because they couldn't take her to a restaurant, and they had to drive 90 miles to Salina for her to have a place to stay because she couldn't be that in the city of Jewel, Kansas. So my father is kind of getting impatient with my mother because she's kind of going on and on, which sometimes happened. And my dad looks at us boys and says, "You know why your mother is so upset about Aunt Jemima?" And we're all kind of looking like not knowing what to say. And then he says, "Well, it's because she was named after a..." And we all froze. My mother had taught us to never use that N word. The table was instantly quiet. My brother said nothing. My father said nothing. My mother said nothing. There was just silence. And then my mother pushed her chair back. She stood up and she looked at my brothers and I and said, "Yes, I was named after a Negro." And then she explained that her mother, my grandmother, had had several attempts to have a baby, and they all resulted in miscarriages. And the last one, she nearly died during childbirth. But she desperately wanted to have a child. So my grandfather found a woman that lived a few miles from them on a farm, and she was black, and she was a midwife. And so he brought her there, and it was agreed that she would help my grandmother through the pregnancy and through the birth. Well, my mother was born, and my grandmother survived, and that woman's name was Goldie. And so my grandparents named my mother Goldie in honor of the woman who gave them a child. After saying this, my mother got up, walked upstairs, and not another word was said. It would be 30 years before my mother and I ever talked about this incident. She was in the hospital. I came to visit, and she filled in lots of details for me. And one of the most exciting and happy things that she talked about was Goldie used to come and bring her a birthday cake every year on her birthday. Goldie was a very independent woman, a farmer, a midwife. She was not a Jemima or a Mandy or a Mammy, which were all white words to describe a servant. No, Goldie was Goldie. I often think that maybe some of that was a heritage that she gave my mother, because my mother, Goldie, was a very independent person. There's a little strange twist to this story that I've never quite known how it went or what happened. My mother grew up as a blonde. She was a blonde child, and she did not get her brown hair until she was after 22. This is the photo of my mother's high school graduation. It was a painted photo, and I remember my mother saying the hair looked exactly like that. Her hair was gold. So everybody thought Goldie was Goldie because of her hair. No one knew that Goldie was Goldie because of the kindness of a black woman.